Hello everybody, patch 7.3.5 has launched for World of Warcraft, and you may ask yourself, why do I care? I either have never played World of Warcraft, or I've played it and I've dropped off. Or, you know, you should care if you're currently playing, but if you're one of the former, as in the people who have never played or played and then stopped playing, this patch is meant for you. There's a lot of really cool changes across the board, especially to old leveling and how that all works. And on top of that, they've added an epilogue to this expansion because we're essentially at the end of Legion. We're waiting for Battle for Azeroth to come out. I'm sure we'll see a beta soon for that, and it's going to launch in 2018. So it's one of those, let's wrap this expansion up, let's get it all together, let's fix how the World of Warcraft leveling works, and then with all of that combined, now is the perfect time to jump into the game if you aren't already playing. And I want to kind of jump in and talk about every little change and everything that has happened in this patch, because I believe it is one of the more important patches that we've seen to the game in recent times. So first things first, let's address the elephant in the room, which is that World of Warcraft has had the worst leveling experience for a very long time. Going from level 1 to 60 in vanilla was okay because it was kind of like, oh, this is new and it's better than everything else out there. But over time, that has kind of aged poorly. And in fact, even when Cataclysm changed all the old zones and made them better, they were better for a time, but there was still a problem in the leveling process, in how it all worked, which is that when they added Heirlooms into the game, which are kind of like these items that level with you and give you bonus experience, it turned from being a game where you actually have to sit there and play the game to being a game where you're essentially just running around one-shotting things. And you're no longer playing the game anymore at that point. You're just mindlessly killing everything and doing quests or dungeons and just like grind until you get to max level, and then the game starts. That's okay for a game like Diablo, where the leveling experience is honestly at max 4 hours if you know what you're doing. You're going from level 1 to 70 in Diablo. You get through that 4-hour experience. It's fun, like doing that every season, because there is like its own like meta game to it on how you optimize and how you do that, especially if you want to do it in a fun way and not in a grindy way. And then you get to max level, and then that's where the fun begins in Diablo. It's okay to, I think, compare World of Warcraft to that, as in it has been for the longest time. Get the leveling experience out of the way, get to max level, and that's where the fun begins. But why can't it be both? Why can't the leveling also be fun and enjoyable, and then getting to max level is just kind of like the cherry on the top, and that's where a second part of the game opens up for you? I think it can be, and with all these changes, it is. So what they've done is in Legion, when you start at level 100 and you're going from 100 to 110, you have an interesting experience that hasn't been in World of Warcraft before. Essentially, the level of the world scales with you. So you can go to any of the zones in Legion, and you can level up in whichever zone you want, in whichever order, because for some black magic reason, who knows how it actually functions, everything in the game levels to you, which means you can be in a party with someone 5 levels ahead of you, and it's going to be the same enemy in front of you that it is for them, difficulty-wise. So the way the health scales between the two players, it scales individually for the two players, and the damage they're doing for the two players is pretty much equal based on percentage of health, less than it is on number of health. So the health bar expands, essentially. The enemy has more health for the level 108 person versus like the 103 person. But you're seeing the same thing. You're doing essentially the same kind of damage. And it's really cool because it means that you can level with a friend who might be ahead or behind you. You can go to whatever region of the world you want. And it was one of the best parts of Legion is adding this world scaling into the game. Now they've gone back and they've retroactively done it to the entire game. So level 1 to 100 is now like that. Everything in the world is going to scale to your level. And there are still some caveats to that. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it means that it gets rid of the biggest problem that has been in Warcraft leveling for a very long time, which is the fact that you could outlevel zones. You would get through maybe a quarter of a zone and kind of see a little bit of the opening story for that zone before you were already too high of a level for it. Everything was either green, which means it was like really trivial for you to kill and it wasn't awarding a lot of experience, or it was gray, which means it just gave no experience whatsoever. And that was not a fun thing to do because you always had to be jumping zones, and the process of going from zone to zone and having to do all that travel and, you know, do all of that stuff meant that there was a whole lot of running around and not a whole lot of actually playing the game, especially when you take into consideration that everything had really low health pools, so you could easily one-shot everything, just run around and just one-shot everything, and it felt like you were playing the game with cheat mode on, except at that point, why not just make it so you can like instantly hit max level? Because then, you know, then you at least have some form of being like I get to skip that whole boring experience and now I get to the end game. But instead, you just had to run around one-shotting everything and getting through this experience and out-leveling zones, and it was a lot of just travel and not a lot of actually playing the game. Well, now that all of the enemies in the game scaled to you, you'll be able to go throughout the leveling experience, the leveling process, and actually kind of enjoy it. And the fact that all of the enemies in the game have had their health pools bumped up means that you will actually kind of have to hit different abilities rather than just one ability over and over and over again, which actually is no fun to play. So the game itself, all in all, from level 1 to 110 now, not just, you know, 100 to 110, is a much better leveling experience. Because, let's be honest, while the Cataclysm zones are now as old, or now older than they were when the original zones were launched, right? So it's been a longer amount of time from vanilla to Cataclysm than it is, or rather from Cataclysm to now, than it was from vanilla to Cataclysm, where all of the leveling zones were redone. So, you know, it's been a significant amount of time, but those zones are still good zones. There's still really good story there, and there's really fun things to do in those zones, but you never really got to it because you would get a couple quests into the zone and then you were done with it. You were moving on. Or you were just one of those people who would just grind dungeons over and over and over, which also can be fun for a time, but gets really boring after a while. And now with this, you don't really have to worry about that. You just go to a zone, you start leveling, and you know what? If you're not enjoying the story there, you could just go to a different one. And that is up to you. It's not up to the fact that you are out leveling a zone. And now that everything has bigger health pools, you're actually having to kind of do a rotation. You actually have to use your abilities in smart ways. And it's possible for you to take damage and die because things are going to be doing more damage. So it is very interesting. And then, by the way, that is even with the heirloom items that are leveling with you and are supposed to be very powerful. But in actuality, they are just kind of now the same power level as all the other items. They just have a bonus of you're not having to switch them out because they're leveling with you. And you are getting the experience bonus from those as well. So let's talk about how the zone structure works before I kind of get into everything else with this patch. So MMO Champion has a really good visualization of this, and I'll put it on the screen, and all credit to them. Essentially, they have gone through all of the zones and shown you like what the level brackets are, because Blizzard still wanted to keep brackets on each of the zones, so that way you could wander into a dangerous zone and get like killed by a mob, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't be here yet. Because that was kind of the fun of the original leveling experience in vanilla, is you would just like run into the burning steps or something, and you'd be like, oh, what's this? And you would just get killed, and you're like, that's bad. I should turn around. That's bad. And that was part of the fun. So they're keeping that intact, but it just means that everything is scaled a bit better. So for example, if you're looking at the Eastern Kingdoms, which is like where the undead start, or, you know, the humans and anything like that, you get a good idea of how the zones level up with you. So let's say you started as an undead in Tiersfall Glades up in the north. This is 1 to 20. And then just below that, I'm not talking about the far north, I'm talking like, you know, northwest, 1 to 20. And then you go down into the Silver Pine Forest, it's 10 to 60. So you could actually come back to Silver Pine Forest whenever you wanted, or you can go to Arathi Highlands, which is 15 to 60, or then you can kind of move over to wherever you want in the world. And this goes for the Kalimdor as well. You have the Barrens, you have the pretty much everywhere top to bottom with that, like Ashenvale, which is 15 to 60. You're noticing that you can kind of go from zone to zone and experience the story the way that you want it. And all of the zones in vanilla WoW, so the 1 to 60 experience, level from up to 60 essentially, except for kind of the starting zones. So that way, if you really wanted to see a particular zone, you can go and do that. Once you reach 60, you actually have a choice. Before, you were like, now I have to go do the Burning Crusade, which is way outdated and kind of hard to get through. So like 60 to 68 or 58 to 68, this tends to be how it would work before, was just kind of painful. Now that is much different. You can actually go to either Burning Crusade if you really are a glutton for punishment, or Northrend, and you could just level from 60 to 80 in Northrend, which is awesome because the Northrend stuff is still very, very good. And you get to have your pick of the Howling Fjord or Borean Tundra to start with, and then you can kind of go through and do the zones in whatever order you feel necessary because they have a really good scaling system for Northrend. But you can completely skip Burning Crusade now, which is just, that's a godsend. It's amazing. And honestly, if we're, thinking about how leveling was before, you would be in a weird situation because the idea was if you can get to 60, then you're doing pretty good. And if you can get to 70, then you're fine. The rest of the game is great. Then you go from Outland to Northrend. You're going to level throughout Northrend, get to 80. And then once you hit 80, it's like, okay, let's go to Cataclysm stuff, which is also very good. Let's then go to, I don't know, anything else. Let's go to Pandaria, which is awesome. Pandaria stuff is actually pretty good for leveling. And then you're like, okay, well then let's do Warlords of Draenor, which the leveling process is very cool, and I really enjoy that. And then you're into Legion. So essentially before, if you could get to 60 and make it through Outland, you were pretty much Gucci. You could get to the end of the game very easily. But the process of getting to 60 was a little painful. The process from going from Outland to Northrend was very painful, and the fact that you're out-leveling zones all the time and you're not really having too much fun playing the game because there's not a lot of playing going on, you're just one-shotting everything, made it very difficult. Now with this scaling system in place, you don't really have to worry about that. You can kind of go do what you want, and on top of that, dungeons scale across the board. So all of the leveling dungeons will scale appropriately. You can just queue up, which means queue times are going to be a lot shorter for queuing into dungeons because there's going to be a bigger pool of people queuing up because how the scaling works on that. And all the items that drop out of there will scale to your level. So you can hit up a dungeon the same time a couple levels later, and you may get an upgrade on an item that you got earlier, which is really cool, or a different item entirely, which is better than what you would have gotten a couple levels earlier. And I really like that. But it should be said that it seems now with how things work with the XP that you're getting based on, kills and everything, because the experience required to level up has been increased, but that is because of the way that things will work. With enemies scaling to your level, you're no longer having to worry about them being out-leveled. So in general, it's a small nerf to the time required to level up, but if you're actually having fun doing it, then what's the point of doing it the old way when you can actually have fun playing the game? And on top of that, there should be one thing that's noted, which is that, it should be a little less efficient to level up doing just dungeons, and you should kind of sprinkle them in as you go, especially if you're kind of finishing off a story in one of the zones or whatnot. And that's kind of the fun part of it, is that you actually get to finish the zones, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. On top of that, Battle for Azeroth is bringing new races to the game. They're called sub-races or allied races, however you want to call them. But in order to unlock those, you need to hit max level. Those aren't available yet. They will be available soon. And if you wanted to play those, you have to get to 110 and do some achievements to unlock them. Once you do that, by the way, they're pretty easy, but once you do that, you can then level these characters up as well, and they have their own little host of really cool stuff that they come with. So right now, as I said earlier in the video, is the perfect time to get into World of Warcraft if you've never played it. You're at the end of an expansion, which is always the best time to jump in. You can get to max level. You get to enjoy the spoils of all of the content of Legion. There's going to be a ton of stuff for you to do and enjoy. It's really easy to level up. It's really easy to get gear once you're there. And it's really easy to kind of experience all of the raids and everything and just have fun with the game. And then before you know it, a new expansion is going to be out, and there's going to be even more stuff for you to do. If you're a returning player, this is the perfect time, because if you ever wanted to level a character that you never really got to, you're like, oh, I really want a max level warrior and I don't have a warrior. You can go do that now, and that whole process is going to be much more fun and enjoyable. So overall, 7.3 is a really good patch for this game. Rather, 7.3 7.3.5, because that is this current patch. 7.3 is good too, but 7.3.5 is this patch. That said, I do want to briefly talk about Legion since we're kind of at the end of this expansion. I have played from start to finish. I didn't stop playing at any point. I really enjoyed it through and through. I think Legion is their best expansion. I know people would argue otherwise, but I think it is their best expansion. They took a lot of huge risks with this expansion, and most of them paid off. Legion is not without its problems. People complained about how the legendary system worked, even though they liked having the legendaries. They're really cool, which are essentially these items with really cool powers on them, but you can only wear limited amounts of them, and they randomly dropped, which was kind of the bad part of it. So you never really could guarantee getting the ones that you needed, and it may take several months for you to get the legendary that will make your class feel really powerful, which was really frustrating. But they've kind of evened that out now. The legendary system isn't as bad as it used to be because you're getting these items called Waking Essences, which once you get enough of them, you can turn in for a random legendary of your class and spec for your class. So you'll get legendaries much faster. The time on legendaries between legendaries of just randomly dropping is much lower now. So there were a lot of problems when Legion first launched with this stuff, and that's not really necessarily the case. I think they learned a lot of lessons from it, and the risks they did take that paid off made this expansion super memorable and really, really good. And I'm really looking forward to what they end up doing and what they've learned from this and bringing that into the next expansion, Battle for Azeroth, because there's a lot of stuff there. So overall, Legion has been, in my opinion, their best expansion, and I'm quite fond of many of their other expansions, but I think Legion is the best one, and that just gives me a lot of hope for what's coming next, because honestly, all in all, you look at any issues that they could have had, potentially have had in the long run with this game, with Legion, and you just need to say, like, they're smart people. They're going to learn from those mistakes, and going into the next expansion, we're getting better systems that were a success from Legion, like better Mythic Plus stuff, which is basically like dungeons that are very difficult and require a lot of skill, and the higher level you go in those, the more difficult it gets, but the more rewarding stuff is. Like, there's really cool systems there that I'm excited to see expanded upon in the next expansion. But if you're jumping in at the beginning of the next expansion, you don't have a max level character yet, there's a lot of stuff for you to do, don't get me wrong, but it's not a good time to actually jump into the game. Now is the best time, and I would suggest hopping in. In fact, if you have a friend that also wants to pick up the game and you're both starting new accounts, or maybe you have an old account and you're trying to get a friend into the game that might come and join you, remember that there is the recruit a friend system, which makes it so that the two of you get crazy XP bonuses and stuff as long as you're within a party together. You can summon each other. You get these cool 2-player mounts and stuff at certain points. It's really, really cool. Don't forget about that. And if you don't have any friends to play with and you're looking to get into the game, check the comments of this video. People would love to have you be added and do recruit a friend stuff. People are always looking for, especially people who already play the game, are looking for ways to get the cool mounts that are kind of exclusive to that, and that is always an option. But check out the comments. If you're someone who wants to, find people to play with, make sure you put that there. And if you're someone who's looking for someone to play with because you're not sure you want to play it alone, or you're kind of scared to jump into a new MMO if you've never played WoW or anything like that, this is probably the perfect place to do so, because we have the best community following us, and it's all of you guys are amazing, and I'm pretty sure someone is out there looking for someone to play with who's never played before. With that said, I am super happy for this patch. I'm super happy for getting to level characters that I didn't really want to level before because the leveling process was pretty poopy, and now I'm excited to, which is a big change in this game for me. And at the end of the day, I'm really excited for the next expansion, and that is going to add hopefully a lot of systems that really work and that they've learned from with Legion, but hopefully aren't bad, right? You can always say that it looks good, but hopefully it isn't bad. And again, this is the best time to jump in. So if you are looking to, do it now. This is a PSA. Jump into the game now if you're willing to, because it is actually very, very good. And with the new leveling changes, the game is fun to play through and through, and not just at the end game. But with all of that being said, let me know what you guys think of it, if you're currently playing WoW or if you're not, and kind of how you feel about the game roughly, because it's always interesting to hear your guys' opinion on that. And we shall see you guys next time.